Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks very much for that very kind introduction. I am Richard Dickens from the Social Value Business. Today, hopefully, I will take you through the wonderful world of social value and impact reporting, development, measurement, and just celebrating social value, as it's certainly becoming a fast and growing influence within the UK today. A couple of things I'd just like to point out is there's no necessary right and wrong answers. This is about social development. It's about social research, and therefore social value is not always tangible. So it can be difficult to comprehend at stages. However, we'll take you through a journey today, and it's always good then to reflect back. And if you've got any questions, feel free to obviously drop me a line, drop Jasmine a line, ask any questions. That's perfectly understandable. So just a little bit about us. Don't want to be obviously plug in too much, but we always like to just celebrate how unique we are. So as you can see, Social Value Business, we specialize in measurement, development, accredit and grow, all around impact and value. So a couple of things I just want to point out, and it's actually relevant to today's event, is the £1.7 billion of hidden value. Every organisation who you represent today will have some degree of social value. Chances are it's hidden. You don't know about it because you do it as you do your normal business, your day-to-day business. So a lot of things is unintentional. Some things are, but some things are unintentional. So it's understanding that. And then it's the actual connectivity to the £150 million mark, which is income generated through being able to communicate your value differently. So we'll come on to that in a little bit. So there's two different areas. Obviously some clients, as you can see, some central, local. We've got 2 Herefordshire councils. We like to promote that, which is always good, but essentially we only support them once. And then we do work in strategic alliance with a couple of organisations, the Social Value UK and the Mark. So other reason why you're on mute today is when you do a round of applause later, I can't hear you, you see. So I don't want to be overwhelmed by it, which is always good. So first stage is just to demystify some of the terminology. Social value today is, say, in parts ambiguous, but also can be extremely beneficial to an organisation. And the majority of organisations get confused in some of their language. So as you can see in front of you, I've put down some of the really essential terminology that you would benefit from. In particular, social outcomes and social impact. These are very often confused and mixed. So if you consider every time you deliver a service, deliver a product, there will be some degree of change experienced by a person. So if you're delivering a professional service, that person may get new knowledge, new experience. It's a change. Great, but it's no more than that, just a change. If you're delivering building work, if you're delivering a product, again, it's the same thing. You are fulfilling a need. It's a change, but nothing more. When we look at social value, what we've got to do is actually move that stage further and look at something called difference, social impact. So what is the difference the change makes? I.e., many moons ago, when Jeremy Kyle was on TV, you used to watch Jeremy Kyle and go, okay, yep, I feel all right. I feel right. There's a lot of people perhaps worse off than me and lots of challenges lives. But that was change. I felt different for that immediate piece of time. It doesn't create impact because there's no lasting effect. What we're looking to do with social value is look at that lasting effect, i.e., what difference the change makes to a person's life. And then just recalling and saying, actually, financial value is a little bit misleading because it's financial and non-financial value. People value things differently. Some people value pounds, shillings and pence in the old money. They value time, they value support, they value being happy, they value things differently. And all of which is value and therefore social value. And the other thing I just want to highlight today is also local. More and more organisations, particularly public sector, is very, very keen to understand what value you have to them in a geographical area. So it's great having loads of value and loads of impact over in Scotland, in Belfast, in Manchester. But actually, it's about what's going on and what's being developed in Worcestershire, what's being developed in Herefordshire. Okay, so it's worth just actually getting to know that terminology. But then actually also consider social value isn't 100% defined in the UK today. And the reason why we say that is there's no universal definition. There is a overarching theme from central government, part of Department of Trade and Industry, about improvements to social, economic and environmental well-being. But actually that's quite broad. It doesn't mean too much. So actually Social Value UK, which is a membership body of social value organisations and practitioners in the country, have obviously deemed it slightly different. But you could argue, again, is that clear or not? So we've come up with our own definition. Again, could be good and could be bad, depending on what you view it as, but the tangible impact created for society by and through the actions and legacy of an individual or organisation. So what I'm trying to say is, as an organisation, you need to be clear on what you deem to be social value. Celebrate it, adopt one of these, adopt others, create and adopt your own. But no one's going to ever know what you stand for from a social point of view unless you actually communicate it. So then we actually move on and go, okay, as a result of that, how is it created? Because social value is this slippery old beast, really. So actually, if you just think of it very simply, an organisation delivers something, professional services, a product, organisational change, a delivery of a vehicle, it doesn't matter. As a result of that, there's indirect or direct change experienced by the person who receives. You deliver something on time, there's greatness. You've delivered a product on a shelf, that person has bought it and they go home and do something with it. It could be the fact you deliver a consultancy service, you raise knowledge, and therefore people start to act differently as a result of that information that they've received. So once they start to act differently, you start to have a behaviour change. So organisations today spend a lot of time supporting young people into employment or apprenticeships. Actually, if you think change for that young person is they are in employment, they are learning on the job, they're learning a skill. The difference that makes is far greater than that. It's actually increased disposable income, increased lifetime earnings potential, actually reduction of health and well-being inequalities, because again, that person could be more socially included. So you can start to see how that builds up. So where is actually impact and value created? Again, it's about financial value. And financial value is very much around the cost savings to public purse. Local value, where it is. Resource value, well, actually that is about time. What do you value more? Time spent with a person, or receiving money? Or if you could save a GP appointment because you can help people stay healthier for longer, what's more valuable? The £43 to £7 that it costs for a GP appointment, or the 11.7 minutes of time for that GP appointment? What's more valuable? And then obviously the emotional, psychological and physical change experienced by a person. So actually, in reality, we've got to see how this all pans out and why this starts to become more important. Well, we've got the legislation. We've got the Social Values Act, which again, some of you will be aware, and I won't go into in too much detail, but the key thing here is public sector were encouraged and said they should consider economic, social and environmental aspects when procuring services. So what that's meant is driven a lot of organisations today to say, okay, we've got to be a bit more modern. Our old corporate and social responsibility needs to be more modernised to be social value. And what we're seeing is up to 30% weighting of public sector focus on social value, i.e. 30% of the entire score, generally taken from the quality can also be kind of split between quality and the commercial. So around 30 to 40% commercial, 30-ish% on quality, and the remaining 30-ish% on social value. And we're actually seeing a steady push towards SMEs and local SMEs, because as local organisations, for where you operate, the money you spend on your supply chain, the money you spend on your staff, by and large, will retain locally. We'll come back to that and the reasons why that's important. And actually, people are starting to be more aware. So younger people, the generation X, Y, and Z, are starting to be more ethically driven and values driven. So they're asking questions. They want to work with organisations that will support them and nurture them differently. So it's moving that responsibility, that's corporate and social responsibility, into you are now accountable for your actions. You're accountable for helping change. You're accountable for doing the right thing. And we'll come on to how that looks in a minute, if that's okay. So what we've got then is, okay, we know the basics of social value. If we start to look about the principles, now there's 7 key principles in everything that social value represents. So these are in front of you. I won't go through all of them because it's actually relatively clear, but there's a couple of things I would like to. If you think that social value is created as a result of your actions, your delivery, your culture, your way of life, the people you support, the people you engage with, actually, what's most important thing is you measure what matters. And you measure what matters simply by asking your stakeholders, what do they value? So if you know what they value, all you're doing is reflecting back to them your value. Classic sales technique in many ways, but more importantly, you're reducing down the amount of effort you would need to ever report and measure social value. And that links into only including what's material, so what you can prove, what you can demonstrate. And obviously, understanding what changes. And we'll come on to a term, theory of change, a little bit later, but essentially what changes for a stakeholder, a person. So if we start to say, okay, we've got a lot of influential things going on, we've got a groundswell in the UK today, we've got to start thinking about how to build a strategy. And strategy is quite simple. It's not about having a massive document. It's just having a focus and actually having a clarity on what you're going to do in an emerging field. So again, what we need to consider is going back to the very basics and saying, how are you involved in engaging people? How are you involved in engaging young people, the local community? How are you engaging with product and service development? How are you demonstrating what added value beyond that basic delivery of an item or service delivery of that hour's worth of one-to-one support? What are you doing differently? What are you going to measure? Why are you going to measure it? Because if you do CSR now and report CSR, you will just build upon that. If you don't do anything, then it's actually taking those baby steps. But the best thing to do is actually ask yourself one question. Why am I doing this? Am I doing it to generate more income? Am I doing it to increase my marketing, my range, my transparency? Am I doing it for better engagement, involvement, uptake, participation? All of which are completely valid and there's no actual problems there at all. But what is important is you know what you want to do, and then you can develop your approach accordingly. So what you're doing is developing your own way of measurement, not chasing over and after other systems and procedures. No point. Go back and say, okay, this is what we find important. This is what the people around us are saying is important. We are going to measure that, and then we're just going to find the appropriate methodology to help us with that. And ultimately having that transparency, because again, investors, funders, public sector, private sector are all looking for you as SMEs and you as bigger organizations to say, okay, social awareness is more important. What are you doing to help us to achieve our mission? So how this then links into income and value is quite simple. Is think of these 4 key areas of income. So trading, commissioning, funding, and fundraising. Trading is business to business or business to an individual. You need to demonstrate local and that emotional value, i.e., what are you doing for local communities? What are you doing as a local person? How are you supporting them to engage? How are you making them feel when they purchase? If you're selling your services to the public sector, both now or in the future, you need to be looking a little bit differently. You need to be showing your financial value, the cost saving, the return on investment, but also that return on investment is local, together with partnerships. And then what you've got, funding and fundraising. Now, these can be third sector, social enterprise and charity focused. However, there's more and more organisations and funding pots that will support startup or innovation grants, investment, social investment, for example. So you can see the areas they're looking for. So when I said before, let's be a little bit smarter about what we're going to measure, let's look about the reasons for measuring, and then you can see what that focus should be, if that makes any sense. So what I want to just do now is say, okay, if we're now looking at a focus on social value, we know that there's a need for it. We know that people are valuing things differently and there's a benefit to celebrating it. Let's just try and talk a bit more focused now. So let's take some of those concepts, some of those values and ideas of your stakeholders, customers, beneficiaries, clients, direct, indirect, families, friends. And if you were to ask that question, what do you value about us, me, our service? What would they say? Some of you may know, some of you may not. But if you did, and you wrote those keywords down, and then you were to represent and play that back to them in a range of thematic areas, because you will create value in a range of defined areas. And I've put that in the middle. And I haven't done another one because it gets a little bit too wordy, but effectively it's health and well-being, education and skills, employment and justice, so employment and volunteering, crime and justice, social and community, housing, environment and local. So each of those values you would link up and assign to a thematic area, and then you would create a range of commitments, i.e. if you are passionate about supporting local people or young people into employment through your delivery of services, apprenticeships, work placements, that type of thing, employability skills, then actually the values that you may see is nurturing, development, upskilling, opportunity. So you can start to create those pledges, again 2 to 3 values per pledge. And what that can look like then is simple as this. We pledge to reduce the number of individuals that reach crisis point, again keyword, and require urgent medical care intervention. So that was a health and wellbeing organisation. The other two, one is education, one is employment. But actually, all you're then doing is focusing. This is what we believe our stakeholders value. This is what we are going to achieve, i.e. the pledge. And then all you do is focus on how you're going to measure it. So all of a sudden you've gone from measuring everything to measuring a very succinct point. You've just saved your workload by infinite percent and all the trials and tribulations of it. But then you go, okay, how do you know whether that's achievable and how do you know that's actually clear? So all we're then doing is converting those pledges into key value indicators. So you will all have KPIs. You'll all have key business indicators or key performance indicators. But they're generally about development and compliance and growth. Great. Why not have these key value indicators that sit alongside to say, yeah, we do this and we make money and we fill our boots. No problem with that. But we want to do it in the right way. We won't do it at all cost. We nurture and support people. we take care of our staff, we support the community, we do community or corporate volunteering, we support young people, we donate to a charity, we involve with fundraising activity. But it's just putting some clarity and direction and focus. So what you've done is taken that journey, say, yeah, we value what matters, we're valuing what's material because it's relevant, we've actually put a focus, and we've put an indicator of success. That there is your strategy, and that there is how you communicate it back to your businesses, back to your clients, because all you're going to do then is measure what's important. But then you go, okay, if this is all important, CSR is great because you've got environmental, social and economic. What do we do? How do we measure it? Panic, panic, panic. Well, actually, just go back a step and go, do you know what? Having that first part, having those pledges and KPIs and value-based incentives and insight is great. The methodologies come second. There are 120 different ways to measure social outcomes, impact, and value. The vast majority of them will be irrelevant to you unless you're very, very niche and specialist. So the best thing to do is ask yourself a couple of questions. How much scrutiny is there going to be over your claims? So are you likely to go for a big contract and the local authority is going to say, okay, prove it. You prove that you've achieved that 14 apprenticeships or the 35 hours of mentoring for young people. Prove it. How do we know that it's been achieved? If there isn't a need for scrutiny, that reduces the amount. Because the vast majority of those models, of the 120, vast majority of those do not have an audit attached to them. They're self-certification, which is fine, but we've got to remember what that's going to influence. And then we've got to think, okay, hearts and minds, so qualitative and quantitative. So the qualitative is about how many times people have experienced an outcome or an impact, great. But then the financial value attached to that. So for every person that may go through an apprenticeship scheme, it's about £168 per week. But it doesn't get everybody out of bed of a morning. It doesn't always speak the language of your particular stakeholder. It may be a case study to demonstrate that in word and narrative form. So actually consider all these areas. What's the driving need? But there's two stand out. There's two probably more regular ones that people use. So the first one is social return on investment. Now you can do a lot of reading on this and I won't go through everything because we don't have time today. But it's based on those 7 principles I mentioned and the theory of change. i.e., in theory, what has changed as a result of XXX? Your delivery of service, your delivery of a product, your support, your culture, your growth, your development, your organization. And because it's based on cost benefit analysis, it gives you the ability to provide that ratio. So you know how much your product or service costs and you're charging to your customer. But what's the cost saving? So for every pound spent, there is a return on the investment of X. So that's quite common in the third sector, so social enterprises and charities. But actually, it can be equally as powerful and impressive from corporates, SMEs, and community and social minded organizations. And what we've also got to consider is you don't have to evaluate, you can forecast. Very much like you can forecast your financial accounts. So if you're wanting to support people into employment, you want to engage with mental health support, you want to support or reduce people going into prison, if you want to support people getting into homes, if you want to deliver a particular product, what is the forecasted value of that social value? Every person today has it. Okay, so how that looks, if we put it into the context, what you see in front of you is a very basic theory of change. So it's the direct, indirect, and hidden impact and value that you have going in. If you think about all this different value that you have to achieve your services. You've got contracts, business to business. Effectively, you've got income coming in, but you've got all that goodwill. The IP, the methodology, your approach is all to do with you and has value. You all deliver a product or a service or a thing or an article. Brilliant, no problem. And then the people will experience the change. And as we see that little dotted line, that is as far as a lot of people get. And that is really the CSR reporting kind of deadline or the reach. What we're just looking to do is take it that one stage further to say the evidence of that change is happening is blah, the difference that change, and therefore a financial value. But I'm going to give a couple of examples in a minute. So you've got a journey, we've got a social value, we've got a pathway, we've got a theory of change, and we know why and in many ways how. So we start to look a little bit more specifically. What does your organisation need to deliver activities? What service and support have you provided? So outputs. So again, 15 hours worth of support. It could be 14 televisions. It doesn't matter, but it's what you delivered. So then we start to put that in context. If you asked, for example, young people or any of your staff or any of your beneficiaries, your client base, that research question at the bottom, what has changed for you? Obviously, this particular example is about young people and apprenticeships, but if you ask them what's changed for you as a result of our organisation, that's where you get the information of outcomes, what's changed, going back to that terminology. Some examples here of actually, we've got a young person, stakeholder, output is the number of apprenticeships and the potential change that person may experience. Actually, that's quite impressive. But actually, you can't monetize that. You can't put a financial value to it. But you can if you take it one stage further and say, okay, we're saying that there's change related to confidence, etc. But if we were then to look about taking that one stage further and saying, okay, confidence, there's a link to mental health. Actually, how do we know that mental health has been evident? But actually, people are more motivated. If you've got positive mental health, people are increasing their social engagement. Productivity can change. Young people can increase and develop and achieve a higher educational attainment figure. Plenty of research out there. So to your client, to your beneficiary, to your service user, if you asked, what evidence is there that a change that you've just told me has happened, this is the type of things that you would get back. So all of a sudden, we start to move along the theory of change, or that map I showed you a couple of slides ago. So, okay, we still can't put a financial value to that, but we could if we start to understand the difference. So the difference made is the impact your organisation has. So looking at that then, the outcome, mental health, improvement to mental health, what there's a direct correlation with, as you see here, reduction of antisocial behaviour. Every time there is a reduction of antisocial behaviour, on average, and I say on average, it's £500 cost saving to the public purse, i.e. to the government. A completion of an apprenticeship, touched upon that before, actually is £168 a week value to society. Start to kind of see this, improve mental health, linking into talking therapies, CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy and other forms. On average, the cost of that is £640 per session of therapies to achieve the same outcome. But actually, the person's going to have increased disposable income because they've got a job. And that job, they've actually can see moving through, moving development, changing. Okay. There is now a potential to move to the next stage and saying, okay, if we know these things are impacted, actually, where is the value? And for the purposes of this, we're saying young person, increased disposable income actually means more money into the local economy. because that person may, we don't know, but may not have been, has been in receipt of some degree of welfare benefit. So job seekers allowance, for example. So all of a sudden that person's gone into apprenticeship, they're no longer claiming the welfare. So there's a saving. That person now has money and they're now spending that in the local economy, and we'll come on to that shortly. They have more disposable income so they can have more social activities. Okay, we're in COVID world, a little bit more tricky, but essentially they're investing in local activities. And then because that person has a trade, you know, a lot of apprenticeships take construction, for example, a lot more on the tools, so there could be the sparkies, the chippies, all the way through to more of the technical architectures, world, etc., increased earnings potential. So actually you can claim some of that benefit because you stimulated it. And that's amazing. So almost you're creating value without actually realizing it. It's just asking yourself a question. What's changed? What difference does that change make? So all I've then done is just showed you in front of you is how that kind of looks and how that gathers momentum, both for a young person, but also for the employer. You know, so this is kind of more hard economics. You've got a young person who can go into an apprenticeship. Yes, you're actually developing a skill. Yes, you're fulfilling that skills gap, but you are reducing your own recruitment cost, which is about £3,500. But you're also getting somebody perhaps who's willing, more focused, and actually being able to build on that succession planning. You know, you can go deeper and talk about productivity and all sorts, but on the surface, you've got a fundamental value there. Only when this is tied in, however, to local does it make sense. So again, think of what's important to you. Think of where you want value to be created as a person, as well as a business. So the vast majority of you today will be circulating around Worcestershire or Herefordshire. You may have a few outside of that, but essentially that's where you'll be. So vast majority of what you value would be local. Friends, family, local. Generally, if you're selling your services to the public sector, chances are you either want to or have engaged with Worcestershire or Herefordshire councils, the CCG, the police crime commissioners, frameworks, etc. So let's think, okay, you've got all this value, but what are you attracting as an organisation? How many of you today may have generated investment, so taking on loans, taking on grants, etc. Money that's originated from outside of the economy, outside of this local area, and you brought in. That's new money into the economy that nobody locally has had to generate. That's value. And then what are you doing with that money? Are you employing more people, training more people, developing more people, selling more people, or services, should I say? And then think about what you're paying your staff. So as a result of paying your staff, there's a couple of really important facts. For example, did you know, on average, 52 to 57% of what you pay a member of staff will retain in the local economy? That's actually quite powerful. So for those of you who say, well, actually, we don't create no value, we don't have young people, etc., you pay people. So if you think for every pound that you pay somebody net salary, 52 to 50%, 57% stays in the local economy, that's a good swish around the economy. And then again, it looks about wider than that, is chances are they are spending that within the local economy, a portion of it. That goes, exchanges hands to another organisation. So you've got that multiplication effect. How many of you today invest a lot in training of people? All of you probably. How much do you invest in things which are non-mandatory? Now that's the question. How much time and money do you invest in developing skills which necessarily you don't have to? It's not a legal requirement, i.e. data protection, health and safety, food handling, etc. and your standard compliance on your industries. What are those other skills? That's got value. That's skills that people will take anywhere when they leave you. Lifelong skills in many ways, some of which are relevant, some are not. All that has value. So you've created jobs, you've developed jobs, you're spending money the local people are. And then think about where you spend money as a business. How much of your supply chain is local? Because again, there is a way of multiplying that money. So if you're spending £1 locally, on average, about 2.35 times the value will be to the economy, i.e. it will exchange hand a minimum of 2.5 times before it leaves the economy. So you're talking big figures. You're talking simple things that you do that you don't know you do. You do it because it's business as usual. And obviously you're looking at carbon footprint. Now, 3 things here: recycle, emissions, and reduction. So recycle, diversion of landfill. How much of you do recycling just as an office or a factory, manufacturing facility? On average, the financial value to landfill is about £80 a tonne. Simple. Have you ever considered how much energy, utilities you consume year on year, and you've made your commitment? Actually, there are ways of saying for every gas unit you use, an electric unit, every water unit that you use, there is a cost saving and an environmental saving. Carbon foot calculator. Very simple. And then you think about the other activities, the other encouragements, and it may be cycling to work schemes, it may be promoting public sector, public transport, maybe walking, etc., as opposed to using a car. Or it may be that you've chosen to use biofuels in any sort of transportation. Again, that has value, both local and then when you scheme it up to national. So you've got all this happening, but we've just got to remember 2 other things. First thing is, you will not do everything on your own. You will do it because, 1, you want to, but you will do it in partnership with others. You may do things, but that effect may also be there anyway. The outcome may happen because other people are doing it. Or that person who you've helped and supported may go on to achieve that anyway without you. So we have to think about your influence. The biggest question that I can always say to you that you ask others: how influential are we? Your products, your services, your methodology, your way you work, how you develop, how you achieve, how you promote, how you communicate, how you recruit. Because if you know how influential you are, you can define your value. And what that looks like is asking roughly 4 different questions, but there can be a 5th. What would happen anyway? So taking that apprenticeship, well, actually, that person may have got apprenticeship anyway, even without you, because they may have gone out and found out themselves. Actually, are there other organisations who help to achieve the same value? Again, if you think about the improvement of someone's personal health, or staff members' health, or your beneficiaries' health, well, actually, there may be multiple organisations and agencies who help them out. But if you're influential in instigating that person health improvement, then you can claim greater value. Thinking about crime, great example, that if there is a crime initiative crime prevention initiative, should I say, to help an area become less socially challenging, but also areas where people have a lot of fear and potentially a lot of antisocial behaviour. If there's a drive in Worcestershire, what made us push out into Herefordshire? Because that crime or behaviour may not change, it made us move. And then think about how long things last. Just because you've done something once doesn't mean it has or doesn't have a multiple year effect. So things can last for multiple years. Very simply put, when you buy a computer and you have it with Microsoft or the Mac equivalent, great, no problem. but you have to continually learn how to use the software. Otherwise, it's out of date. So you learn something and it has a lifetime. Value is the same. You can develop a new skill, and that skill can have value until that becomes obsolete or there needs to be retraining. Okay? So all this is really important, and there's different ways of communicating it. So a couple of tips for you. It's very simple. Follow your influence. Follow your influence and measure the trust that your organization has. And that is only given to you as a result of your stakeholders. So ask that question. How much do you trust us? How influential are we? What has changed for you? And then what difference that change has made? Consider those mandatory and non-mandatory areas. Think about what you're doing as a result of what is good practice because you want to. How often do you over-deliver, overachieve? Do things which are not legal, i.e. above and beyond what is required as opposed to not being illegal. Find out where things originate from. Buy more things local. Focus on supporting local businesses because that has greater value. Same with people. Track that inward investment. Follow that client journey, outputs, outcomes, impact, value. And then be sure the hearts and minds. Thinking back to that slide I showed you about income and value. Final bit is the best practice, which actually you can take and digest because it will be meaningful once you've actually obviously heard all of this. But the bit I just want to mention as well is something called social value question mark. Now, social value can be very ambiguous. Biggest thing here today is if you're going to put yourself out there and may have scrutiny, consider having it audited, consider achieving a standard. A couple of standards out there at the moment today. Social Value UK, self-certificated 1 to 3, worth having a look at those. Other one is Social Value Quality Mark. Main difference is this is actually audited, almost like any other ISO standard, for example. So 1 to 4, and you can see the different ranges on the right-hand side today. So next steps for you, consider your own social value definition, put it out there, start communicating it. Ask yourself them questions. What do your stakeholders value and what is important to them and why? Consider establishing a panel only to ask these questions. It could be a customer panel, a service user panel, a beneficiary panel, a client panel. Draft your own pledges and commitments on 1 area, 2 areas, 3 areas of health, education, employment, justice, and create your own KVIs. And by doing that, you'll be able to apply a financial value to what that success will look like. And why not, provide the evidence and go for the social value quality mark level 1. So that's a whistle-stop tour on a very complex subject. I hope you found it useful. I've answered a couple of questions probably as I've gone ahead, but I'm happy to take as many as you want.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Richard. Very interesting talk. I hope everyone else found that useful to their business. I'm just going to ask you to stop sharing your screen for a moment. Yep. And if anyone does have any questions, if you could please put them in the chat box. I will just type another message in there so that pops up for everyone.
There we go.
Lovely. Perfect. Just while we wait for any questions to come in, I'm just going to go through what online events the Chamber are running in the next week. So firstly, tomorrow we have lunchtime networking, that's 12 till 1. And then Friday we have our Chamber Champion Awards, which is a one-off virtual online awards ceremony, and that is 6:30 till 8:30 p.m. Then next week on the Tuesday, the 8th, we've got UK and EU talks and future trading relationship, and that's 3 till 4. And then Wednesday, the 9th, we've from 10 till 11, we've got our employment law update. All of our webinars are free for members of the Chamber. So if you'd like to join on to any of those, please let me know and I can book you on. Richard has agreed to send me the slides, and I will follow up with them afterwards, along with his details as well. So I think that's it from me. Has anyone got any last minute questions just before the webinar ends?
There was a question from Emma Gardner.
Oh, there is, sorry, I've missed that one. So I'll read that out then. So how can you evidence that a change in behaviour / impact has made due to your service / intervention? It may be part of the solution.
Yeah, it's actually relatively simple, actually. Ask them how influential you have been in the change they've experienced, and ask them to rate it between 1 and 10. And then once you've got a multiple number of responses, you just average that number out. Best way to do it.
Okay, fab. That's that one then.
Just actually on that, just to actually follow up, which may be useful to you. When it comes to understanding how a person's experience change, there's 3 different ways of doing it. You can find out what emotionally has changed for them. So what are they feeling? How has that feelings changed as a result of your service? What are you thinking, or how are you thinking differently as a result of your service? And then the final one would be, what are you physically doing differently as a result of that service? And that will give you all the evidence you need to be able then to potentially put a financial value to it.
Perfect. Thanks, Richard. We've had a really nice comment in there for you. Just one reminder, sorry, on the follow-up email, we are currently running our quarterly economic survey. So if you haven't filled it in already, if you could, I will send you the link. It's just so we can get information to feed back to local and national government. Obviously, it's really important to find out how your business is doing. So I will send you the link after this, and if you could fill that out, that would be really, really helpful. Thank you. But I think we've come to an end. So thank you again to Richard for taking the time out to come and deliver this presentation. I hope everyone's found that really useful. We've had some really nice comments in the chat box, so thank you, Richard. And
it's a pleasure.
That's it from me. I will follow up with the email, but I hope you will have a lovely afternoon, and thanks for joining today. Take care. Bye.
Take care. Thanks so much, all. Bye bye.